So this was a summer trip, a summer adventure to Adak, Alaska, Adak Island, and we basically made a plan to activate both Adak and Kiska Islands, which were Kiska is relatively a rare iota, and that was the intent of this expedition was to get down to Kiska and activate it for 10 to 14 days. Let me. Here's the team. There's myself to the left, Yuri, N7QT, Tim, NL8F, and Hal, W8HC. And let me move this out of the way. And Walt, NGX, N6XG. I'm standing, by the way, I'm standing in front of a McDonald's sign in Adak. And the prices, this was taken, the McDonald's, I think, closed in 1991, and the prices are higher there at that time than current McDonald's prices are today. So just to let you know how expensive eating, resources, electricity, everything out of Adak, just because it's so remote. I got involved with Yuri and this whole IOTA adventure in 2020. Yuri invited me to go to Tillamook Rock and activate it. That was another rare one. Myself being somewhat cautious, took a look at this photo, and you can see the seals down at the bottom. And when I took close-ups of the satellite views, I realized the door to this lighthouse had been busted open and occupied by seals. The top of the lighthouse, the glass had also broken, so I assumed it was pretty wet and pretty awful location to go operate from. So I politely declined the invitation at the last minute, and Yuri found a few other people to go with him. At the end of this expedition, I find out that they were pretty much bad-mouthing my name the entire time because they said Rob was the real smart one for not going. It turns out that the lighthouse was infested with seal poop, and so in this picture, you can see they set up tents on the outside. Well, a rainstorm came day one or day two in their expedition with lightning and everything else. So they had to basically continue the rest of the expedition inside of the lighthouse. When they came out of this expedition 5 days later, everything they had, including suitcases, clothing, had to be thrown away because they couldn't get the stench out. So anyway, it was that bad in terms of an IOTA expedition. So I'm glad I pulled out of that one. This is the Adak, kind of a big view of Alaska, and I'll move my mouse if you can see it. The important location there is Cordova, which was where the seal, our boat that was going to take us to Kiska, left from. And this is this QTH here called Cordova. And it was to sail to Dutch Harbor, which is part of this blown up section of the Aleutians that I show down here. Here is Dutch Harbor. So from Cordova, the seal, which was the name of the boat, was to sail to Dutch Harbor, pick up Tim, along with 1,300 pounds of our gear. At which point it was then going to sail to Adak to pick the rest of the operators up. And then on to Kiska, which is over here, IOTA 070. This Kiska is part of the Rat Islands. And that was the plan. A little brief history about the Aleutians. If you guys haven't read this book for any World War II buffs, it is a must read. It's called The 1,000-Miled War. And I think it's spelled out 1,000 by Brian Garfield. So if you're interested in knowing about the battle that took place along the Aleutians. It's a fabulous book. I purchased it and read it prior to going to Adak. The highlights of it was on June 3rd and 4th, the Japanese launched air attacks on Dutch Harbor. And on June 6th, they invaded Kiska. And by June 7th, they took Attu Island. The Japanese then proceeded to install a submarine base as well as seaplanes. And this is a photograph taken after the Kiska was recaptured of a Japanese sub. And basically there's railroad tracks that took the submarines down to the water. And they're basically a two-man electric submarine. They still are on Kiska to this day. The Japanese basically blew them up prior to the Americans landing. As the war progressed, the U.S. Essentially established an air base on Adak, and then dropped about 6 million pounds of bombs over the next year on Kiska and Attu. A big battle took place on Attu that was extremely expensive in terms of the loss of life, ending with the Japanese doing a bonsai attack on the Americans, and in essence losing the war. It was sort of the end of it in terms of losing Attu. And then on August 15th, there was the battle for Kiska. It lasted 2 days with 35,000 troops, US and Canadian troops, invading Kiska. That was severe weather, very, very cloudy. And what they did not know was that the Japanese garrison, the entire Japanese garrison, had evacuated Kiska several days before. And so the Americans and Canadians, essentially 300, roughly a little over 300 of them, were killed in friendly fire, because they couldn't see who was firing at them, and they assumed it was the Japanese. So I did not know this until I read the book, and I don't remember covering this in my history class in high school. But it was the Japanese general. This is an interesting side note. The Japanese general that basically evacuated his garrison prior to the Allied forces landing is viewed in Japan currently as a hero for having saved his troops. We received letters from several hams, Japanese hams, that knew the general from their own hometown. And they basically were very, very eager to make contact with us on Kiska. So it's really, however many years later, to see, a friendly exchange of QSL cards going forward. Here's what Kiska looks like today. Lots of abandoned equipment. This is the submarine that I'm talking about. It's still there today. The railroad tracks have been sort of covered up. But there are still many, many unexploded ordnances on the island. It's now the Aleutian Islands. It's part of the World War II National Monument, as well as the Maritime National Refuge. And we needed special permission to land on Kiska and operate from Kiska, which we received. Adak was essentially a naval station throughout the Cold War. We visited a bunch of derelict buildings that were part of the this entire listening post, and all of the radar and equipment that they had. It was just fantastic to go through and see, top secret signage on all of these underground bunkers. And it was just incredible to see what it was like when the thousands of troops were on the island during the Cold War. But essentially, the Navy pulled out in 1997, which was at the end of the Cold War. They transferred all of the land that they controlled to the Aleut Corporation. And the population that live there today, permanent residents, number about 36. The rest, the 300 or so contractors, are there to clean up what's left of the World War II, Cold War remnants, ordnances, fuel tanks. There's a lot of cleanup work that needs to be done. And so basically there's 326 people, of which 30 actually live there. So the plan was to activate Kiska in 2020, but it was canceled due to COVID. And we basically shipped 1,200 pounds of gear up to Dutch Harbor, where Tim lives. Tim runs a hydraulics repair, marine hydraulics repair company on Dutch Harbor. And we basically shipped all of our gear up there in 2020, but it had to wait till 2021 before we attempted the activation. We hired a boat called the Seal, and here's a picture of it. It's a 56-foot aluminum hull cutter, and it cost us $30,000 to basically get this ship, the sailboat, to go from Cordoba to Dutch to Adak to Kiska, back to Adak, back to Dutch, and then so it roughly cost us about $6,000 per operator to have the privilege of activating Kiska. So here are the arrows. Essentially, the Seal leaves Cordoba, as I spoke to you about previously. It lands in Dutch, picks up Tim, loads all the gear, sails down to Adak, where it picks up the remainder of the team, and then on to Kiska, and then in reverse. So that is sort of the, the plan of this expedition. June 9th, several days before we are scheduled to leave, we received this email from the Seal captain. His wife is the person that had the medical emergency. They turned around one day out of Dutch Harbor and to fly her to get medical attention. So at this point on June 9th, we're pretty much dead in the water, several days before we're supposed to leave. And so we had to make a decision whether we're going or not. Tim, the wizard, basically comes to the rescue. Tim, through his contacts running his marine repair shop, pretty much knows every sailboat, every marine fishing boat in Alaska at this point. He reaches out. He finds a company that is going to be arriving in Dutch in a couple days from the time that we got notice. And he thinks he can find us another boat to take us to Kiska. So the team makes a decision. Let's proceed on short notice. Even though we don't have a guarantee about a boat taking us to Kiska, we decide to ship all of our gear from Dutch to Adak on a boat that the wizard has found out. And there he is with his little wizard hat, right? We still had a lot to do. The city of Adak required COVID tests coming in. The ship that Tim has found to take us from Adak to Kiska required a personal agreement, basically to hold the vessel owner not responsible, harmless if you wish. They wanted an evac insurance policy for all of us, so we had to basically get $1 million evac insurance to in case something went wrong while we were on Kiska. And then we had to take a bunch more COVID tests prior to getting on the boat. And so this is what all this paperwork is all about. On our way to Adak, this is some of Hal's gear. I think we were all in the same boat. We carried a lot of gear. In this case, there were 4 check bags and 2 carry-on bags that Hal brought. And this was pretty much a station, a complete station with amplifier, coax, and all assorted sundries of ham gear. The entire team meets for the first time. I knew everyone in this picture, but a lot of the individuals had never met each other. So again, this is the team. There's Yuri to the far left, Hal, myself, Walt, and Tim. We land at Adak. It's considered the birthplace of the winds by the Aleuts. And let me tell you, they were not wrong. This place was always windy. I'll show you a videotape of the winds on a calm day. But it is, that's the terminal when we arrived to the left, and also the same photograph of the terminal on the right-hand side. It's a pretty small building, and there are only 2 flights a week to Adak. This is inside the terminal. Everybody's still wearing masks, and we've got a couple of the guys looking at some of the old photographs of the World War II listening posts and the church. So that's Hal to the left and Walt to the right. Chris Tolliver was our host, an amazing host. If you guys want to go caribou hunting, that was another interesting thing that I'm sorry, let me go back. Another interesting aspect of Adak, they basically brought in herds of caribou. And the caribou have since multiplied, and now it's a big source of revenue for the island with folks coming in to go caribou hunting. Chris Tolliver was our host. He basically provides duck hunting tours, halibut fishing sessions, and just an amazing guy. This is the azimuthal map of Adak. If you can see, to the east is the United States and South America. So basically, if we had to work NASA, it's directly east at 90 degrees. And Europe is essentially to the northeast. All right, that's an important point. Europe really wanted us, and they are probably one of the biggest IOTA supporters around. When we land, the American flag flying in the distance is Chris's location. That's his home. This is where we were going to operate from on Adak. But the scary thing was, if you take a look to the north, is this giant rock that is blocking our path to Europe. So basically, we felt pretty bad given the fact that no one thought about having Chris send us a photograph of what his QTH looked like. So basically, Europe is blocked from our Adak location. Here's another photograph of that rock from the side of Chris's home, and Europe is on the other side. So we decided we need to come up with a solution, or Europe will not get credit for Adak Island. And there is Tim. The wizard comes into play yet again. Tim says, I have a friend that lives on Adak. Why don't we call him? And instead of operating from Tim's location, or I'm sorry, from Chris's location, let's go to Mark's location if Mark will let us use his place. So Tim makes a phone call. Mark says, no problem. You can use my home for your operation out of Adak. Here is a view of essentially a drone shot of directly above Mark's home. And this direction right here is to the west, to the United States. There is a little blockage of sorts to the east. And I guess I'll go back to the start of the video where you can see Chris's home over here to the left. Can you see my mouse over here? That Chris is right up against that hill to the north. So between north and east is completely wide open from Mark's location. And here's a photograph of Mark's home. It is essentially standard military issue. Essentially, the island was built to house 5,000 to 6,000 troops and their families. And right now, most of these homes are empty. So considering there's only 36 people that live there, pretty much standard issue. The appliances are all the same. The furniture is the same. The homes are the same. What's happening now is that, let's say you have a house on the island and your refrigerator breaks. The rule is that you can go to any of the other empty homes and get a spare refrigerator to repair yours, as long as it's not occupied. So no stealing from each other, but all of the several thousand homes can be used as spare parts. And so that was something that I thought was so interesting. And if any of you are looking for a home for $10,000, fully furnished, you can buy a home in Adak for 10 grand. The Aleuts will sell it to you. Electricity is super expensive. The bill for our 2-week operation with 3 stations running kilowatt amplifiers was just over $2,000 for the electric bill, to give you an idea of how expensive it is to live there. We put up the 6-meter antenna first. Notice the scenery on the right-hand side where one of the homes burnt down, and they basically bulldozed it. And that's the photograph to the right with the 6-meter Cushcraft antenna being put up. And here's a photograph of the first photograph to the left. You can see the 6-meter antenna here. This was a 40-meter vertical that we erected in front of Mark's home. And again, none of the adjacent homes are occupied. So we basically had this entire cul-de-sac for ourselves in order to put up antennas. We eventually, on the right-hand side, is a photograph of a big IR, which we installed later to do essentially 80 through 10 meters. Here is our 20-meter VDA, essentially a vertical dipole. And you could see it's being fed in the middle here. And that's our basically our 20-meter vertical that we used during the operation. Here's another view. In the far distance here is a 30-meter inverted L that we erected on Adak. And so we basically positioned antennas in front of abandoned homes, if you wish. And this is us still getting some work done. We met another ham on the island. He was a contractor working on the remediation project. He stopped by to visit. He had heard that there were some hams that were operating out of Adak, and so he came to visit us. He was instrumental. We were running short of barrel connectors, and so he provided some of that. We had some missing parts for the big IR vertical that he also provided parts for. So it was great. He worked in a machine shop and essentially had access to things that we needed and could use. We're setting up stations. This is the first station to go up. This was the 30-meter inverted L was what was connected up to the station, and we're pretty much trying to check it for resonance. Here is Walt operating a little CW on station number 1. This is, sorry for the lack of focus, but this is station number 2. This is a view of both of them. So here's station 1, station 2 in the background at Mark's Place. This is station number 3. This was a Sun SDR, a Juma amplifier, essentially a 1 kilowatt amp, solid state. And this is the first time that I've used the Sun SDR, and it was actually very pleasing to listen to. I have not received my SDR radio yet, but it was a lot quieter in terms of phase noise than my K3. And here is Hal getting set up for SSB operation. And the reason I posted this is that we were so, it was so difficult to make SSB contacts out of this location. Not sure why, but we called CQ more often than not in terms of getting SSB contacts. We made a lot of FT8 contacts, we made CW contacts, but SSB was extremely difficult, and without very good internet access, we weren't sure whether or not an aurora had happened, but conditions were very, very tough. In preparation for getting ready to go to the to get on the boat, Heather to the right there was the nurse practitioner, the one and only nurse practitioner on the island. And there is Tim having to redo his COVID test. And this time he stuck it up so far up his nose that he had tears in his eyes. So this was part of the requirements to getting on the vessel. And in preparation for going to Kiska, we went through all of our pallets, trying to arrange. We realized we had a lot of stuff, and we wanted to minimize the gear that we were going to take. There's about 7 totes worth of gear, and we were trying to get it down to about 5 totes, and that's what we were doing in the warehouse. This is the generator off to the left. It was, I think, a 6 or 7 kilowatt generator that was going to power the stations. And there is Tim's Zodiac that he wanted. He was thinking maybe we could get some fresh fish while we were on Kiska. And so he basically brought in a Zodiac that we could use. Tim didn't get access to his emails. Tim was basically calling back home to his corporation, because that was how he was communicating with the boat that was basically going to pick us up in Adak to take us to Kiska. They sent him an email on July 1st, but Tim did not receive it until July 11th, after he had returned to Anchorage. And basically, this is the boat captain writing Tim to his personal email instead of his corporate email, and basically saying, we might be able to pick you up on July 10th. But we never received that email because Tim was checking with his company to see if he had gotten contacted. And that's how they had communicated prior to this trip. So on July 4th and July 5th, we decided we're probably, we hadn't heard from the boat, and we basically called off the expedition to Kiska at that point, and let the world know that, if they want their refunds, they can have their refunds. So basically, here's a team photograph of the ops on Adak. And you've got the details of when Yuri left and the rest of us took off. And here is a view of the island. These are all abandoned homes and basically laying waste because there's no one to take care of them. Here's some of the views of, this is the Great Siskin volcano, Siskin Island, and it's still an active volcano. As you can see, there's still some smoke coming off the top of it. It's just a stunningly beautiful place. Here's another view of the lupins in front of the Great Siskin Harbor. And by the way, this boat that is out in the harbor was the boat that was supposed to take us to Kiska, and we didn't know about it. This is what a lot of Adak looks like. This chair, it wasn't arranged. This is here when we got there. And you can see an old beat up, I believe this is a Ford that's been burnt down. But the entire 3,000 homes or however many homes are essentially going to waste. And most of Adak is a ghost town, and it looks just like this. So that was, for me, one of the more shocking aspects of this island, where you've got hundreds of homes that are just basically going by the wayside. This is a photograph of Yuri going into one of these underground bunkers. And this is where the Navy operated from, underground. This is a photograph of a shredder that was used to shred all the top secret documents. And a lot of equipment, basically the remnants of our intelligence gathering operation, are all that's left. Here's another photograph of a street. All of these homes are abandoned. And this is the QSL cards for those that worked us. We tried our best to hold these flags, but as you can see, it was super windy. And it took us about 20 minutes to get this shot because no one could hold their flags in place long enough for the photograph to be taken. But this is our QSL card. And after 9 days, we did about 10,000 Qs, just DXCC 102, and we hit 36 CQ zones. The bulk of our operation, as you can see to the right, heavy on FT8, CW. I myself, Hal, and Walt were the primary CW operators. 20 meters was pretty much where the bulk of our operation occurred, with most of Europe, and then down below are the breakdown by day of, or by zone, I'm sorry, of all of our contacts. But we made just over 10,000 Qs. And here we are. We're planning to go back to Kiska in 2022 in June. And this is kind of how we ended the operation. And that's what I have for you guys.